Well, Australia, New Zealand, it is that time of the year. Super Bowl behind us. I'm here on holiday, staying in Phoenix, Arizona for a little while. And Laurie hits me up and he's like, mate, you live a 2 hour drive from 151 Park Avenue, NFL headquarters. You and I, we brainstorm our shows. We have good ideas. We have good ideas. Why don't we, with the advantage of time and hindsight, pitch to the NFL some concepts as they undergo the script writing we all learned about for the 2023 season. So this is the NFL Brekkie Show, brought to you by Ford Everest. Conquer every day in the Ford Everest. Laurie, I mean, I think that about covers it. I'm here. I have my sparkling water. Everybody, don't worry. It's blood orange tangerine. It's going to get our creative juices flowing.
It certainly is. You're poolside at the moment, looking very relaxed and casual. I'm in 30-degree heat, but on the balcony because I wanted to match in some way the summer motif and vibe that you were giving off over there, desert adjacent as you are. Look, script writing has been, ever since Arian Foster had an interesting interview with another publication, the script writing has been a meme, a talking point, an ongoing social media presence for the last couple of weeks. And we thought, you know what, we spent some time writing scripts in our time. We spent some time poring over copy, verbiage, and maybe we take a look ahead and prognosticate a little, especially with some of the key characters and figures that enter this free agency, or the trade rumors as well. I shouldn't say just free agency, the trade mill as well, when you think of the likes, perhaps Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, some other big names. Later on, we're going to touch on some rookies with our Ford Toughest Rookie segment brought to you by, as you mentioned at the top of the show, the Ford Everest. And we'll look at some casting ahead from 2022, some players that didn't quite make the podium for the Offensive Rookie or Defensive Rookie of the Year awards. They weren't nominees in that final instance there, but that we think are poised to make a massive splash next year. And then obviously we'll finish with some good vibes with some Maccas. I'm loving it. But off the top, let's get script writing, Phil. It's a far more, I'll say far more physically fit and a far more summary version of perhaps something we saw in Love Actually, off by the poolside or by a lake doing some script writing. Thinking way back when that was Colin Firth's character, I believe, Love Actually, wasn't it? Am I right there, Phil? Am I on the money with my memory there?
Laz, I'm not even really all that. I'm not even listening to you, really. I'm already focused on, the plot twists we need to conceptualize, some casting conversations we need to have. But I'll be
right.
your Colin Firth.
You will always be the Colin Firth in my life, Phil. All right, let's go, because this is your brainchild. This is where we started. Let's start from the top in this ideation creation session. I want to hand it over to you for our opening note.
Well, you got to consider, because we're writing script on the NFL's behalf. They did not solicit this from us. I'm going to cold knock on the door. I need the Tarantino front page, grab your attention kind of script writing. But before we even get to any plot, Laurie, I mean, casting is more important in my estimation than a good plot. If you think about it, if you have an A-list cast and a mediocre plot, you can get a classic. Look at Dumb and Dumber, right? I mean, golly, they casted that perfectly. We've done a million road trip movies. Why is that one so iconic? Well, because, Jim Carrey, it was a budding star. He was terrific. And conversely, if you have a very poor, think like any kind of made for TV, made for VHS, made for DVD, made for Blu-ray, whatever the kids are watching these days, movie with a cast, even if the plot's compelling, you're not going to want to watch it. So we want to focus first with the cast. And you mentioned it, free agency starts on March 15th. That's the beginning of the NFL calendar year. But we are not shying away from potential trades. You look at a situation like an Aaron Rodgers. Has he run his course in Green Bay? Will he follow his predecessor's kind of career trajectory? Is that compelling vision for him to do the Brett Favre? Green Bay's hand might be forced. They are in a really tough salary cap situation. Either they're going to have to offload Rodgers or offload the other Aaron Jones, and a number of other key contributors. So for me, with Jordan Love in the fold, it's a better storyline. And again, whilst we're prioritizing casting over plot, we can't have plot holes, right? We can't just wake up and Russell Wilson's back in Seattle and Aaron Rodgers is leading my Broncos to the Super Bowl. That's not going to happen. But where is he going to go, Laurie? And I got my script writing notes here. We can rule out Kansas City. We can rule out Buffalo, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, the Chargers. Miami and Denver don't have the draft capital to make it happen. For sake of this conversation and a compelling plot, I'm not putting him back in Green Bay. I don't know, man. Who do you, I got like 8 here where he could land. Where are you tipping that Rodgers will take his first snap in 2023?
Well, I think if this was a big budget script, if this was a
Is it
holiday
not
time,
the NFL? It's a $40 billion business.
if this was a big budget script, perhaps a rom-com set in a major city, you can see Rodgers, in New York, the Jets with a very, very strong roster, really good defensive roster, a lot of talent on the offensive line they can work with. Add another piece, I think, in the interior of the offensive line to really round that thing out. Hopefully get Breece Hall back nice and healthy. Maybe add another receiver to go with. We know Garrett Wilson's there. Elijah Moore, it's been up and down the last couple of years. Some very high peaks and then some very dramatic and contentious lows. Is there another target there? But throw Rodgers in there. That would be, that classic, holiday time, big budget rom-com where New York City is really the main character. But I'm going a little different here. I'm going a little off the beaten path. And I was looking across the rosters and I was looking across the quarterback needy positions. And I was looking at coaching staffs that have been put together. And Aaron Rodgers, no shortage of feistiness in his character, known to bite back. He's been known to, flash the championship belt sign at opposing teams. So I got a question for you. Another feisty animal of the cat variety. They find over in the Carolina regions. Carolina Panthers for Aaron Rodgers. A much, much, much improved offensive line. A coaching staff with Frank Reich coming on board and some of the names he's added. Some very familiar names for a Broncos fan yourself. Keeping your offensive line coach there who was sought after across the league. You've got DJ Moore, get good offensive line. You've got a very, very intriguing defense with pieces across the board. Brian Burns jumps off the top, JC Horn, Jake Brown in the middle of the defensive line, and there's more talent scattered throughout that team. Jeremy Chin. That's a team that isn't getting that kind of Las Vegas Raiders, obviously with the Devontae Adams connection there and them moving on from Derek Carr. It's not getting the attention of the New York Jets, but from a roster standpoint, from a coaching quality standpoint, I think you look at that coaching staff, it's a lot of talent there that'd be really intriguing for a very, very savvy football mind in Aaron Rodgers, and that he could find himself in a position, he's talked about, wanting that investment, wanting those bona fide, additions to the receiving core. I think there's pieces there already in place for someone like Rodgers to step in. And then one other thing, you look at Tom Brady in his late career and the move he made away from New England and finding himself down in Tampa. The NFC South isn't scaring anybody. This is a nice division to move down to. The NFC North, where he's coming from, you got the rising Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, very frisky, and Justin Fields. Whilst the roster isn't solid in Chicago, he's a game breaker, one of the game breakers of the NFL, particularly at the quarterback position. Get down to the NFC South. The Saints are trying to figure things out. The Falcons are certainly trying to figure things out. I mean, are you overly concerned? And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I just mentioned, plenty of talent on the roster, but an aging, expensive roster with a huge question to answer at quarterback. Could the Panthers, they're around the salary cap number for now, but they've got a few contract switches they can flick with some of the big name or the big talent that they have given extensions to. They can create room. The Panthers, that's an Oscar type of nominee film script writing that I'm looking at there. That's not your big budget, blatant, big, Hollywood size letters, in neon flashing. This is something a little more, not fully art house, but something with a little more substance, and something that takes a different turn than we thought at the start of this Rodgers conversation. Am I out of my mind?
It's everything, everywhere, all at once. I like where you're going. And you're right. It is a ripe division for somebody to make a run, but man, those divisions last that way for about a year, and then there's this just influx of free agents. I think Derek Carr could end up just as likely in Carolina. I think New Orleans is going to be looking to add one of these big free agent QBs. Atlanta could as well. And then you start looking. You need a team. Since this is a trade, this isn't a free agent signing. You have to consider more than just cap space. The Vegas Raiders jump out. Funny enough, the Cardinals do as well, but I don't see them sinking any more dollars into that quarterback position with all the dead cap they have waiting, like an albatross with Kyler Murray for the next couple of years. I mean, if we're going to write a script, Laurie, Would he go to New England? They have cap space. Are they gonna step away from Mac Jones? They have draft capital. They can make it happen. I mean, he's not going to Houston. Indianapolis is another one that has potential. They've done the aging QB. Chris Ballard, the GM, seen it every year since he took over in 2017. They've had 7 different Week 1 QBs in 7 years. It's going to be 8 for 8. I think they're ready to either go with, trade up and get a Bryce Young or trade up and get a CJ Stroud in the draft. Carolina's as likely as any. Man, if we're talking script writing, Rodgers going to New England and trying to do something, it's Super Bowl or bust if he goes there. Or we know his affinity for ayahuasca, potentially among others. Seattle seems to be right in his vibe, right? They have draft capital.
I think for a lot, they do. That would be him arriving in Seattle, considering the good vibes that are emanating off Seattle and Geno Smith at this point. That would be like a 4th installment of perhaps a franchise that has the word fast or furious in it. Maybe an 8th installment. We just let's throw chaos in the first 5 minutes of this script and just blow it up. Let's throw John Cena in the middle and see what happens here. I think you're right. Look, you look across the board, and the point that you touched on there about draft capital or that this is a trade situation, that's what makes Carolina so interesting because of what they did, offloading certain talent and moving out recently. They have the 9th pick in this draft. They have their own 2nd rounder. They have San Francisco's 2nd rounder, and they have 2 4th rounders. They have their own 3rd rounder. So they have the San Francisco's 3rd rounder, and they have this all off the Christian McCaffrey, heavily influenced by the Christian McCaffrey trade. They have 2 4th rounders as well. So that is a team that can put together an interesting trade package and get into some interesting negotiations with a Green Bay team. They're uniquely poised that they have both talent on the roster, and by jettisoning a very talented but good, but valuable running back, and running back, valuable in the scheme of running backs, but as a position, we've had that conversation over recent years. That receiving a ransom in return has put them in a very unique position to make an upgrade. You got to think with Indianapolis, though, that their story with veteran quarterbacks has to have been written. I mean, you hear what Chris Ballard said, and you've heard what the likes of Jim Irsay have come out and almost put it in concrete, that etched it in there that, hey, we're going young here. We've done this dance before. Rodgers is separate from Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan, but we have done this dance before. It's time for some youth at that position. Yeah,
they're going to try. I think they are going to trade their draft capital, but I think for the sake of our conversation, I think we propose that they trade, they go with their draft capital, and they move forward to the number 1 pick. You mentioned Justin Fields. Even though there is a thought, if they're in love with Bryce Young, perhaps they take him and then try and trade away Field. But it seems that they have their guy under center. They have lots of cap space, far more than anybody else. And there's a minimum spend. They have to spend it. They're going to be the top spending team in the offseason. And that's I can't agree. There's the idea of Tepper and Fedor. Yeah. See, I'm bearish on Rodgers going to the Panthers. It just I can't envisage him in that shirt. But then again, we could have said the same thing about Joe Montana, Chiefs back in the day, or Brett Favre. And Vikings colors, the blasphemy that was. So we've had some plot twists before. Oh man, the Jets seem too obvious. The Raiders and the Devontae Adams, it's believable, certainly, and they have assets to make it happen. And gosh, I love the idea of him in Seattle, though. Pacific Northwest, going up against San Francisco. Again, another stick it to them because they passed up on him in the draft. Where are we going, Butts? We going? I'll put the quill in your hand before as we move on. Is it Seattle? Is it Carolina? I agree. It's not Indianapolis. I think we have them trade their draft capital. They go number 1. They finally know that back-to-back years they should have the same quarterback starting for them in week 1. I'm leaning Seattle, but I'll let you make the final verdict on what we're proposing to Commissioner Goodell.
Well, I like that we're going somewhere different here because the story of him going to the Jets or the story to him going to the Raiders has been well worn already. The Raiders, if you take the blinkers off on, a resurgent Darren Waller and obviously the Devontae Adams connection, the offensive line needs a lot of work, and that defense is, no offense to the likes of Max Crosby, phenomenal off the field and on the field talent, but that defense leaves a lot to be desired. I'm gonna let's roll with your suggestion here. Let's go real weird here. We're gonna go out to Seattle, the host city of some very memorable '90s classics and rom-coms and screams. I will say we've got a lovely comment. We've got Brad weighing in on his Panthers before, and he also said Phil's giving the '90s WWE Mr. Perfect vignette vibes. Those feelings with that setup. I mean,
I have a football I can throw to myself if I look around this yard.
I think that Mr. Perfect analogy there in comparison might have just got to you a little bit much because it's just jagged your audio around for a sec there. I think the perfection is coming off the motif whilst the audio took a hit for a second. But moving on. Okay, let's put him in Seattle. Let's put Aaron Rodgers in Seattle, which kicks us forward. If Aaron Rodgers is going to Seattle, obviously means Geno Smith is now on the market. But we're going to look at our other key player there. And you tell me if you don't want to jump straight off into this direction. But before we move even more around the board, a Lamar Jackson. Now these, one of these options, one of the perhaps more obvious options, say like a New York Jets, or I mentioned the Carolina Panthers is more open now because we've sent Aaron Rodgers over to Seattle. Again, a pretty loaded roster there, the wide receiver team, the improved offensive line, the defense you expect to take a step forward. Lamar Jackson, is this a story of staying home and knowing what and finding love with the one you are, or is this a harsh breakup? Is that wrinkle being written into our script?
No, we have Eric DeCosta and his slick back there, punting on this decision, franchise tagging Lamar Jackson. It's the smart move. It's a sensible move. We don't need this isn't M. Night Shyamalan. We don't need twists every opportunity that we get them. We don't need to put Lamar Jackson in Atlanta just for funsies. If I'm the Ravens, and you and I have talked about this on the show, heck, I said in week 3, when Lamar was off to his terrific start, he should go and say, hey, I know we decided the table conversation, but we did $50 million a year, X amount guaranteed, whatever. They should have got that deal done, because what happened in that he got hurt, PCL sprain, missed the rest of the year, the Ravens tanked. It affirmed both sides. It affirmed to Lamar that he is irreplaceable in Baltimore, and it affirmed to Baltimore, who doesn't want to give him Deshaun Watson level of guaranteed money, that the way Lamar Jackson plays, there's an injury liability there that would be concerning to give him that type of money. Well, now we're at an impasse because both sides have just deepened the argument that they have. So I'm saying in Baltimore, very boring situation. Franchise tag him, a 1-year deal. The average of the top 5 salaries in the NFL, so it'll be somewhere in the low 40 million, or maybe high 30s, probably low 40s. I've done the math on it. And if a team's keen to train 2 first-round picks for him, Baltimore would entertain that. I think they would consider it, but this at least gives them 1 more year of, can we either adapt to Lamar Jackson's play style to make him less susceptible to injury, or does he show more durability, or does he further affirm that we can't be sinking $200 million into this guy because for the last 2 seasons he did not play in December, and it materially cost the franchise. Franchise tag, it's boring, but again, sometimes in the slasher film, somebody's going to get got when they walk into the woods. All right, you got to just it's right there. It's how it's meant to end.
I think with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and I don't want to borrow from one of our early season segments, who got hot, where we were coming back from summer and people had shaped up and perhaps had a new aesthetic. Maybe been in the gym. Maybe it was just as simple as a new pair of glasses that was really changing up the look. But I feel like while there's been some tension and they've had some time away, maybe they've had like, hey, look, I'm going to go away for a couple of months and really have a bit of a think. It's a work holiday. I'm going to go away for a little bit, have a little think, and we're going to come back together. And usually when that happens in the movie, we kind of feel like, okay, this feels like a breakup movie. This feels like this is where we're going. We're heading separate ways. But then just before you get back, maybe you're scheduled to have coffee the next morning, you haven't seen each other in a couple of weeks, couple of months. And you're scrolling on Instagram and you just catch a photo of your significant other, and just maybe they've gone back to an old spot, maybe they've done something new, maybe they've changed up just a little. Maybe the caption is speaking, with a little more verve, a little more energy than maybe has been in the balance in the relationship of late. And you go, okay, maybe we're going somewhere here. Maybe this coffee, maybe this catch up is gonna reignite things and set us back on the right course. And for me, that new look, I mean, Greg Roman interviewing with different teams in the mix with Washington, it seems. First, the Ravens, we saw reports around someone like Eric Bieniemy coming in, very exciting, but they're hiring Todd Monken. I mean, you talk about downfield bombs away. Let's let this thing fly. You want to talk about Fitzmagic at his prime down in Tampa Bay, just letting that thing rip. What we've been asking for the Baltimore Ravens for so long, Phil, so long, is we want to see this thing aired out. We want to see this aerial offense have some room to breathe. Please give us some spacing, give us some attacking. Lamar Jackson is an underrated thrower of the football down the field and remains so. And that starts from pre-draft and some of the ridiculous comments that were made about him as a prospect, but he remains an underrated thrower. You hope you get healthy Rashad Bateman back, fit and firing. We know Mark Andrews there. We desperately want some more wide receiver investment, but this is as divergent a look as where we were going. This is as divergent a path as we were going from Roman to Monken. This is apples and oranges here, and this is exactly the type of spark and electricity that you walk into that coffee and the hair's done right and the sun's hitting the right way and you falling in love all over again. I think it's a great hire. It's a great move. And I'm very excited for what looks like on paper is the kind of boring part of the storyline. Oh, he's staying together, staying home. No, this is we found something substantial here, and this has rekindled my hope for long-term and substantial happiness, Phil.
Yeah, and that's why I think he stays at home. But Law is somebody that you put forward, and I don't think it makes sense for him to stay at home. It's one Odell Beckham Jr. We know Odell's career trajectory, made himself known as a stud receiver coming out of college, goes to the Giants, has a terrific early part of his season, early part of his career, really set a new gold standard for guys coming in the NFL and making an impact. He ultimately goes to the Rams, is playing very well in the first quarter of that Super Bowl, tears his ACL, gets a Super Bowl ring, but he misses all of last season as teams, the physical was concern. Now you got a receiver who's, are we worried about the knee? Where is he going to end up? He's a full offseason to find a spot. And at his best, he's at any Sunday the best receiver in the NFL. There have been some, reported potential locker room concerns. The Giants are coming back in the mix as an obvious destination because, as great as they were year over year under Brian Dable in year one, NFL Coach of the Year, and I believe the Brekkie Show awarded him that sometime around week 8. The Giants have a grown-up decision to make about Daniel Jones. I do think they re-signed him. Saquon Barkley, less of a certainty. And then you start looking at those receiving options. All due respect, it is thin. However, I think the better plot line is for him to stay in the NFC East. There's a team in North Texas, Laurie, who's looking at a team in Philadelphia and saying they could go on a run. Nobody's repeated as division champ in this division in 19 years, 2004. The Eagles took over for the Cowboys. Now the Eagles, everybody's talking they're a budding dynasty. Jerry Jones ain't having that, but he's got to look around and be very honest about the horsepower he yields and says, we probably need a little more help. Odell, can you play nice with everything else we got going here? Can you play nice with Dak? Can you play nice with Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott? Laurie, I think OBJ, if we're casting, and we are, we suggest to the NFL in our script writing for this season, put Odell Beckham Jr. in the star, have him be this decade's Terrell Owens. Toss popcorn on his face, T.O., run to the star. Well, again, he was on the 49ers when he did that, but you know what I mean. Make a show of it. That's my take. What do you think?
I'm in lockstep with you here. Surprise, surprise. But this is one where I think that the love that Jerry Jones has for Odell and the idea of Odell Beckham Jr. wearing a star on his helmet, that is substantial and that is real. It didn't come about due to health in this run in the playoffs, and the noise around that was deafening at points. But I am in lockstep with you here. I think there's a match there. Look, the Cowboys currently sit at $6-7 million over the salary cap now. We know there's going to be some moves there. They've got some contract switches they can flick. The contracts of Ezekiel Elliott will not be back in that same form. If he is back, it'll be on a reduced rate. There's questions around the likes of Tyron Smith, but there's plenty of restructuring, money to move around that they can create a substantial amount of space if they want to make any number of moves. They haven't been overly aggressive in free agency of late. That is since basically the Brandon Carr deal almost a decade ago, when you're handing out, I think it was $50 million for Brandon Carr at the time, which is dwarfed by the money these days as your top line free agent cornerbacks and DBs. But nonetheless, I think Odell Beckham Jr., if fit and healthy, is exactly what that offense is missing. Someone to go up and aggressively snatch the football outside of Cedarian Lamb on CD Lamb. Speed, CD Lamb is probably the fastest on the roster at around 4.49, 4.50 in the 40. They don't have anyone that runs and breaks the game open and threatens the top, threatens to go over the top, quite like an Odell Beckham Jr. would add to that offense. They brought in a T.Y. Hilton to try and run that role and create some separation on third down as well late in the season. It's not the Noah Browns of the world. Michael Gallup, we need to see if he can get back fit and healthy. Dalton Schultz is a free agent, and I'm not sure that's the target. You look at some of the deep metrics around EPA generated per target at the tight end position and receivers in general. It wasn't the most efficient year for Dalton Schultz, as much as he's a savvy route runner and he has some slippery movement skills. He's not a game breaker. He's not a massive tackle breaker either. A fine, solid tight end. But if you're looking at the $14, $15, $16 million a year mark, I don't think that's where you're going. Script-wise, look, the narrative writes itself. This is Odell's mentioned that, big chunk of his family, I believe his father's family. There's a whole lot of Dallas Cowboys fans on that side. Personality matches the city. Can he get along with everyone? I think there's respect there between him and CD Lamb, who's come in at a younger stage and looked up to someone like Odell Beckham Jr. before he's in the league. Dak Prescott, we're talking Walter Payton Man of the Year. There's a certain presence and command that he has in that locker room. I think you absolutely can make that fit. I think, ideally it doesn't end with the tears and the still ongoing meme that is, that is my quarterback from it's my quarterback per Terrell Owens. But when you're looking at character, you're looking at script, you're looking at setting, you're looking at scenario and surrounding cast. I think we've just gone check across the board. I think we can cast that one and send out the offer sheet today.
All right, Bob. I mean, we could do this casting thing all day. Hey, you look at some other guys who we know are going to be free agents, let alone the trade market. Orlando Brown, left tackle for the Chiefs. Saquon Barkley. Heck, half of the Eagles starting defense. Fletcher Cox, Robert Quinn, Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave.
DeAndre Hopkins' name has been thrown about there.
All Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury, all those guys, Jason Kelsey, all those guys free agents to be in Philadelphia. And we could do that all day. We've hit the top line once. I'm going to throw out some potential plot twists for you. I do want a little M. Night Shyamalan in this. You tell me what you're thinking. I'm going to go heavy off the top, okay?
Let's go rapid fire. Let's do it. Let's move.
Jacksonville replaces Buffalo in the AFC top 3. What are you thinking?
I'm in. I'm in when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, and I know feel
Josh Allen. My case, my rationale. Josh Allen now goes from the rookie contract to the big boy contract, $16 million more on the cap. Again, it's 8% of the cap, not even. But that restricts some of the flexibility that they've taken advantage of in free agency signings in past years. Now they can't. Joe Burrow's still on his rookie deal, and it seems as though the Chiefs have figured out how to work around Patrick Mahomes' contract. So of all the teams in that top 3, I think Buffalo is the most susceptible. Jacksonville there to step in.
Absolutely. We're talking Travis Etienne. We're talking improved offensive line that can add to. Calvin Ridley has applied for reinstatement to join. Looking at Christian Kirk in that starting lineup, I'd love to see them bring back Evan Ingram. I don't think he's going to break the bank, and I think you found something that worked there. Evan Ingram should know, after the tough times that he had in New York with consistency, that's the most consistent and explosive play he's had. He's found something with Trevor Lawrence. The hands were always a question mark with Evan Ingram. There's nothing wrong with the way that the Trevor Lawrence spiral hits the Evan Ingram hands, and we've got that pick in the 20s now where we can look at some of these top wide receivers coming off the board. You got Ridley, who's shifty, fast, great route runner, underrated red zone weapon and scoring touchdown ability, a familiarity and feel in the back of the end zone there to put points on the board. Christian Kirk, who a movable piece, but not an overwhelming physical presence from a size standpoint. What if it is a big Quentin Johnson that makes his way to that pick there in the back half of the first round? And now that's what we're rolling out. Those 3 receivers, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne in the backfield, Trevor Lawrence sitting behind a solid offensive line that you can add to. Yes, that's a bona fide top 5 type offense that they could be rolling out there, and a defense that has a lot of young talent that you expect to mature and grow into year number 2 for a lot of players, year number 2, year number 3 for some of those young picks. I'm on board there. You got I green like that.
And Laz, you look at Jacksonville's draft capital, not just in the first round, in later rounds, they've drafted fairly well in those mid-round picks, despite some of the struggles they've had. Some of those guys have come to fruition. Who else is going to challenge them in that division? Again, if the Colts go with a 1-year QB rental, I don't think they're going to, and our script is saying they're going to take the top pick. They're going to trade with Chicago to get that. They're going to give all their draft capital to take a Bryce Young. Houston's not ready. Tennessee's going to regress because they don't have draft capital. They're strapped with the salary cap, and it just seems as though it's just going to be, we're going to see the continued decline of the wear and tear of Derrick Henry. I think Jacksonville's going to be a 12-win team next year, so it just makes sense that they would overtake Buffalo in the top 3. Okay, Laz, we need a reunion, but I'm torn on this. Jimmy G. Okay, we're going to have him too heavy of a quarterback room in San Francisco. And we've learned that, man, it's almost inelastic demand for a quarterback in that offense. So, yeah, we're going to send Jimmy G away from San Francisco. But do we reunite him with McDaniel or McDaniels? We got options, okay? Because I have concerns. Again, every story needs its sad moments. I am concerned about Tua Tagovailoa's longevity. I want him to be an NFL quarterback for a very long time. He's a great dude. He seems to have figured it out. But we're having routine tackles now have him in the concussion protocol. That's not something that gets better with time. So I think Miami's going to take a long, hard look at their QB2. I think Mike McDaniel, we've seen that he's keen to bring over some of the guys he liked in San Francisco. So that's one option. The other one is Vegas, who is sending Derek Carr out the door. Josh McDaniels knows Jimmy Garoppolo from their time together in New England. We got to do a reunion. Are we doing McDaniel or McDaniels?
Give me McDaniels. Whilst I think there's some intriguing and very Raiders-y looking quarterback prospects in this upcoming NFL draft, perhaps one that played a little bit of football in the fine state. We're talking about quarterbacks playing in the state of Florida. That would certainly come to mind as Raiders-y type traits there. But yeah, let's send Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, it started this offseason, or perhaps when the trailers came out for this movie a little while ago, or the first hints, not full trailers, but the first kind of shots on scene, people wondering if it was going to be the Brady and McDaniels reunion there. This is, I'm not trying to denigrate Jimmy Garoppolo here, but this is somewhat of a consolation prize. But, you're looking for whether you do invest in the draft or not, you are hoping to get some stability at that position, moving away from Derek Carr, a rebirth, a new era. I'm going to send him there. That McDaniels, again, you can slot him into the scheme there. You know that there's going to be verbiage that comes familiar to one Jimmy Garoppolo. There are weapons in place there, so it's not that scenario where you're asking Jimmy Garoppolo to elevate those around him. If Waller is healthy, we'll see whether Josh Jacobs is back, but Devontae Adams, you would think is going to be at that roster. But for Jimmy Garoppolo, this is a set-the-table quarterback. This is someone you need to surround talent with and allow platform for. I that's where I would send him. I don't think I think that's the more likely and the more appropriate script writing turn. But I think this could be the turn in the script that, whilst it makes sense early on, and like, oh yeah, they turned up to the wedding together, I don't know that it's going to end in happiness, because I think structurally there's a lot there that Garoppolo hasn't necessarily thrived in the past.
We save that for the sequel. We save that for the sequel, okay?
Okay.
We allude to it. We foreshadow it. And speaking of shadows, I apologize. I thought the sun was going to set in the opposite direction. So I'm getting more and more backlit by the moment here. We're in script writing. We're not in production. We're not the key grips, whatever they do. So we have a pretty man leaving San Francisco. I'm going to keep a Purdy man in place. I know there's some talk about potential uptick on Brock Purdy. Do they sell high on him? Trey Lance has taken like 100 snaps in the last 5 years of football. The 49ers are playing with house money on a rookie quarterback contract. let those young men battle it out. I assume it's going to be Trey Lance's job in week 1, but if there is any lingering injury concern for the guy who runs the ball a lot and is still learning how to avoid full-on contact in the NFL, you got a great insurance policy in Brock Purdy. So Purdy man leaves the Bay, Purdy man stays. What else we got?
Every script needs a love triangle, Phil. Every script needs a love triangle, and in this one, it's Purdy, it's Lance, and it's Shanahan. Done.
Well, Laz, how about this? We got to start going quick. NFC North has a new king. I ain't lying. And a bear market at number 2. So it is a complete inversion of what the NFC North has been for the better part of the last decade. Lions 1, Bears 2, Vikings, their 1-score games regress to the mean. They'll be a fine team, but I see them more as like a 8-9 side. The Bears claw their way to 9-8. The Lions win the division at 11-6.
Yep, Ryan Gosling gets ready to play his a biopic role that some are saying could make a run at an Oscar.
And it's one of those things, right? When Shawn Michaels became the world champion, just took so long. He was the Intercontinental champion. Everybody wanted it, and the Lions. Everybody just seems to barrack for them as their second favorite team, unless you support a team elsewhere in the NFC North. Who wouldn't be happy to see Dan Campbell and this team get a playoff home game and perhaps the elusive playoff win they haven't had in 3 decades?
I'm with you. I think this is like the real easy to root for, heartfelt part of our script here. This is, it's not the biggest name actor. It's probably played by one of those guys that you have to remember his first name for a minute. You kind of remember his last name. He's that tier of actor. I've just said it's Ryan Gosling, but so I'm really tying myself in a nice narrative loop here. But it's not the headline role, or the headline part of the script. But it's certainly one that there's a lot of heart that goes into that. There's a lot of feelings there. There's a lot of simultaneous tears when it comes up well from the watching audience in the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I got others. I got Russ Cooks, meth, like Breaking Bad style. We got Sean Payton in town banning personal coaches. I imagine Taysom Hill's going to end up a Bronco by the time we're all said and done with things. And
I think we've got Derek Carr in this scenario. If we got Derek Carr going to the New York Jets, that would seem the logical script writing part for us here. Like where we've sent Rodgers, where we have Lamar going, where we have Jimmy G going, all that tied up. There's a blinking light for a team that's talked about wanting a veteran quarterback coming in there. Are we just sending, hit the Gary Newman now, here in my car, I feel safest of all? Is that what's coming for the New York Jets fan base?
Well, I think we have maybe Carolina is an option. If it's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, then perhaps Carolina. Wherever he goes, though, if he goes to the NFC South, that team is the favorite. So I think there's going to be something of a bidding war between the Saints and the Panthers. Probably not the Falcons because they drafted Desmond Ridder a year ago. The Bucs don't really have the capital to keep up with it, and they've got some severe salary cap concerns. But I think New Orleans or Carolina either marching into the Big Easy for Big Derek, or Carolina has got potential.
Any more narrative wonderment that you'd like to lay out with your fountain pen before we shift along today's season finale?
As the dogs start barking here. Laz, I'm concerned that we're going to get rid of the tush push, the Philly tush push that was so successful in the Super Bowl. Philly going 36 for 40 on design QB runs because they got a quarterback who can squat 250 kegs, and I'm not exaggerating there. So successful on these short yardage rushes, but Dean Blandino says the league wants to get away from it, that they called it, quote, a rugby scrum, which, quote, doesn't take skill. His words, not mine, but he's making some enemies down under, that the league doesn't think it's an aesthetically pleasing play. Sean Payton has said if that remains allowed, then he will implement it in Denver, and that's where I think Taysom Hill becomes an asset. Pun not intended on the first syllable of that word. So the tush push going away, Laz, I don't like it. I'm going to tell the league office to keep it around.
Maybe that's part of the sequel as well. Maybe there's just like throughout our scripts, maybe there's news reports, background TV. Maybe, someone's reading a newspaper and you catch the back page where it's like murmurs of, street level underground tush push football mechanisms making their way around different cities in America. Maybe that's an element that rises up in our sequel. NFL script writing. I don't know what our movie is actually called, but I can say the title, semicolon, the tush push returns.
Well, I mean, our movie's called NFL Season 23. Isn't that what we're doing? And then the sequel will be 24. We're just giving some suggestions to the league. If they're going to script the thing, we may as well make it compelling.
We'll call it a working title, shall we?
All right. Hey, Laz,
All right.
how about some players that this year were first year guys that for whatever reason didn't have the breakout that we thought they would or they could or they should? Maybe we give them some love.
Oh, yeah, it's time for our toughest rookies, brought to you by Fort Everest. Conquer every day in the Fort Everest. And this is a time, look, we know there's some big names of the offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. The Seahawks, very prevalent. The New York Jets, even more so. But when we look around and at some players that had their moments but didn't get their ultimate shine, didn't have the true glow up, for whatever reason that was, that I think, I've posited as they're going to break into, say, the top 10, top 15 of their position, but really going to perhaps surpass what some of their contemporaries did in their rookie season. So I'll throw it to you to kick this one off. And I have a feeling we may be flirting around the same position here. But a player that showed everything that you knew about them as a prospect, perhaps didn't get the opportunity for whatever surrounding circumstances to deliver that week in, week out to the degree where you start getting hyped up and put into that kind of final three podium finish for an offensive or defense rookie of the year. Who are you going to? Who's, shall I say, catching your eye, Phil?
Well, Laz, I will say, if we had a trophy for this honor, I think it would be somebody with flowing golden locks stepping out of a Fort Everest, because Trevor Lawrence is the exact prototype of what we're looking for. Somebody whose rookie season was obstructed by none of his fault. He finally, has some grown-ups in the room leading the team, and he breaks out, and he's some would say top 6 player at his position in the NFL. But yes, there is somebody catching my eye. It's somebody who's caught my eye since I watched him at university. I support Penn State. It's where I was born. And they put a number of solid receivers into the NFL, the latest of whom, Jahan Dotson, late first-round pick by the Washington Commanders, a guy with a catch radius that exceeds his height, terrific hands, great route runner, very tough in the red zone. And he really showed those attributes in those high leverage areas of the field, because Jahan, as a rookie in Washington with Carson Wentz at quarterback, and then Taylor Heineke, and then Sam Howell, and I think they had a raffle at FedEx Field for Week 15 who was going to start under center. Jahan Dotson went for 35 catches, 523 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I want to say that again. He had 7 touchdowns on 35 catches as a receiver who's very average in height. He put up red zone numbers like he was a tight end, or like Jerick McKinnon, who it's one of these flare out to the side, basically a long handoff to a running back. That was on 61 targets, though. Terry McLaurin is their wide receiver one. That young man is a special talent. Curtis Samuel has the numbers of a wide receiver too, but I with 60-odd catches. But I think Jahan Dotson, whoever ends up in Washington as a quarterback, if they do go with Sam Howell, if they're able to get in one of these free agency QB sweepstakes, or if Washington is able to cobble together enough draft capital to go after one of the top 3 or top 4 QBs in this draft, and it is a 3 or 4 type guy at the top, I see a Jahan Dotson doubling the receptions, the yards. Touchdowns aren't going to double because Devontae Adams led the NFL with 14 touchdowns a year ago, and Jahan's, if his 7 double, that's where he'd get. It's not going to be 20% of his touches are going to be, or 20% of his catches are going to be a touchdown, but he has proven himself a viable red zone target. I think his numbers next year are in that range of 70 catches for just over 1,000 yards and maybe 10 TDs. You want to talk top 10 or top 15 at your position. Those are the figures that guy puts up. So that's who I pick as toughest rookie to break out and continue his momentum into 23.
All right, I'm going to go with someone who I think had a massive shout to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Didn't get that nomination, played the same position as the eventual winner, Garrett Wilson. I'm going with Chris Olave down in the New Orleans Saints. Look, the quarterback play around him, the inconsistency, the change in line. Sorry?
Big 10 wide receivers.
That's it. Look, they're breeding them strong up there.
McLaurin, Dotson, Olave, Wilson. What are they putting in the water?
Just good old-fashioned college.
Get familiar with the name.
Just that college football DNA, Phil. That Big Ten football DNA. All right, so I'm going with Chris Olave, who's someone who you mentioned over 1,000 yards and 70 catches. He did. He had over 1,000 yards, 1,042 yards, 72 catches on the season. But this is someone that, look, the Saints were largely out of the spotlight here, not a lot of prime time and headline action. I mentioned you get some quarterback stability there. I don't think Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's in that Kirk Cousins type of tier. I think without getting into 1, 2 versus 6, 7, 8, he's in the tier where you do need to set the table around him. But I think Derek Carr, we saw the level to which he could work with a number one receiver in Devontae Adams this year. We've seen his work in the past. Certainly a level up on what, if that was the type of play that comes to New Orleans, certainly a level up on what Olave witnessed this year. But Olave was already top 10. He was 8th in the league in yards per route run, a very good indicator of the type of productivity that we're having there. I think he came in ready as a route runner. The explosiveness, the way that what he showed with his speed and the way he snaps off at the break point, he threatens that intermediate level, those outbreaking routes where we know he's going to just reroute someone. Well, usually it's the DBs doing the rerouting, but his control and his gear changes and his explosion at those points, he basically reroutes the cornerback off the pitcher, able to create instant separation there. Also saw him high point at times. Again, it's not the most physically overwhelming kind of build for a receiver. I saw him elevate over the middle of the field, sidelines, and make some big contested catches. And then his straight line speed to just eat up cushion. If you're going to present him with that kind of off soft coverage, 10 yards off the line, he will chew that thing right up and get on top of your defensive back, on top of your cornerback, and threaten downfield. I think a little more quality at quarterback, a little more consistency there, and this is someone that can absolutely threaten 13, 14, 1,500 yards. Only 4 touchdowns on the year. Expect that to go up as well. But all the detail, I got stuck into a little bit of the. I'm not going to go wild on the metrics, but I've been taking a bit of since basically the end of the conference championship week. It's been a bit of a 2-3 week. Yeah, there's been a bit of a 2-3 week dive into some metrics here that I've thoroughly been enjoying. But all that to say,
look like Tom Hanks from Castaway by the time you get to the draft. His son's going to be in kindergarten like, Dad, where have you been? Well, I was watching all 22 of TCU. Wanted to see some Quentin Johnson tape.
I mean, Quentin Johnson is just the start of it. Just the start of it. We're into day 3 defensive end soon enough here. But regardless, Chris Olave for me, that's who I'm tapping to break into legit top 10 wide receiver conversation next year. Is that a massive tell that to anybody that may be tuning in that I'm in a fantasy league with, that I will be going after him aggressively in our drafts? Absolutely.
Well, as somebody else we could put in that position, a rookie from last year is going to seem to get a greater opportunity. Is a gentleman named Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska. He has an athletics background as a discus thrower, very strong core, and that's demonstrated in how he plays. Now, Laz, why do I bring up the backup center for the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, because I don't think he's the backup any longer. And that brings us to our I'm Loving It moment, brought to you by Macca's. And you and I talked, Laurie, a couple weeks ago about this exact topic, the Kelce brothers in the Super Bowl, and how it was just cool to see. And it ended up being one of the more feel-good Ted Lasso type script writing moments in the Super Bowl. These two guys who, 3 years apart in age, 4 years apart in age, went to university together. Their mom was the social media star, the sweet, lovable Donna Kelce, from opening night when she met the boys on the podium and brought them homemade cookies, to post-game when she was on the field crying tears of joy with her son Travis Kelce, and tears of sadness and consolation with Jason Kelce. Seeing them on their podcast this week and seeing Jason Kelce still brought to tears for what it meant to him to have somebody who he loves more than anybody on this planet, his own mother, be suddenly known and beloved by everybody. I mean, I think it made all of us just kind of feel good and say, like, yeah, these guys are combatants and Eagles and Chiefs, but it really did, it was this contagious thing. The 106 men who put on helmets for either of those sides, it just really just gave it an appropriate tone in what ended up being a terrific game. It's one of the biggest takeaways for me and the most memorable visuals for me from that game is Donna Kelce running around the field trying to find both of her sons who were headed in opposite directions with very opposite emotions. I love that moment more than any other, and then it just it stayed in the spotlight in the few days we've had since the final whistle was blown at Super Bowl 57.
Yeah, we've seen some of the sound come out. You mentioned from their podcast and Travis Kelce, the New Heights podcast, the Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce, the words that they've shared. And then the sound that's come out from the actual game, the field itself, with Jason saying to his mom as he embraced her and had a long, tearful hug, commiserations, and obviously defeat for the Philadelphia Eagles and Kelsey. But Jason there saying, just, Mom, go celebrate with Trav now. Like that, those moments, him standing there on the sideline watching on from, I know 50, 100 meters away. So I should say yards. No, I'm going to say meters away, and watching his brother celebrate on the sideline. And that, as I'm an older brother. I've got several younger brothers, but I think about, what that must have been like for him. The mystery surrounds, his future. Is he going to retire? Would he return to the Eagles if they offered? We mentioned Cam Jurgens, second-round draft pick, is seemingly the heir apparent as another very athletic center to come in. But with Jason Kelsey, to sit there and to feel that moment that my mom's here sharing it with me. I've lost, but I'm watching my brother, my younger brother, in pride. We both have Super Bowl rings. We both accomplished so much, all pros, just heralded, both of them future Hall of Famers, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
As much as it would hurt to retire on a defeat, you could see how that moment would seem not a perfect moment because of obviously the defeat, but such an appropriate, fitting, and final moment for a career. It's something that the more you read about it, the more words you hear, the more quotes you read, the more audio clips that make their way onto social media around what was going through. There's Kelsey brothers in particular, Jason, as it ended in defeat, but this beautifully poignant moment. It was one that will stick with us, and it's a fascinating storyline. But I think something that we come away from Super Bowl week, something that I think we can all say that we'll be loving going forward, is the fact that the Kelsey brothers, retired or not, Jason in the league or not, certainly going to be part of the conversation, part of the football lexicon, and part of the landscape in a big way for a long time to come.
Yeah, Jason Kelsey, 35 years old. He was on a 1-year, $9 million contract. The Eagles have a lot of contract things to sort out, certainly at quarterback. But a guy who was a 6th-round pick and then made 6 Pro Bowls in 12 seasons or 11 seasons. 6th-round pick, 5 first-team All-Pros. He's absolutely a Hall of Famer, and no better way for him to punctuate his stay, if it is the end, than how he did, which was a guy who just moved you. He made you laugh. He made me cry. He made me think. And Laz, that's what good script writing should do. So no matter what Jason Kelsey ends up doing, I would beam with pride being able to see that moment on the field and just remember how that made me feel. Him looking for his brother, finding his brother, looking for his mom, and then saying, go celebrate with Trav now. What a line, what a man. And I think the NFL will be better if he sticks around. So if I have my say at 151 Park Ave, and as I submit this script, I'll find a team that needs some center leadership again at 35. He has time left. He doesn't have to retire. It would be his choice. But if he is keen, if he's willing to play somewhere else other than Philadelphia, I know a number of teams would love to have him in their changing room for the next 3 to 4 years. And I think Laz, I think we're ready to submit this to the league office. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's the heartfelt end, but also one that, as we mentioned, look, we're franchise guys here. It's a little open-ended. There's a little more. There's a few threads that we can happily pick back up and run with for the sequel this time next year. But I think you're right, Phil. I mean, what more beautiful way to put a season recap or a season cap on this 2022/23 campaign. The NFL Brekkie Show, it's number 3 for us, season 3, Phil. And whilst, it carries that tone, your poolside and balcony side, as my backlighting gets more and more extreme.
You always have the better weather all season, so I don't feel bad. No. I don't feel remorse.
But as much as there's that sense of finality about a season finale, it's February 17 here, I believe. Free agency starts in less than a month. The combine is in a couple of weeks. We shall not be gone for long. We will be gone for a little bit.
10 days.
But we shall not be gone for long as draft season kicks up. Free agency season kicks up. A few Australian names in the draft in this crop coming through. We know special teams, always a strong point for the Aussies in the draft. So there's plenty of narratives that we're ready to pick back up on while we put the pens down on our 2023 script. Big things like 2023 trade market, quarterback talk, and free agency. and the draft are only on the horizon, Phil.
Yeah, and to all those watching, this is probably the most fun thing I do every week. So thank you for putting up with our idiocy and just letting Laws and I be fans and friends and consuming this content. For all those who support this content, it means the world to me and to us. So it's why I'm more than keen when I'm on vacation. This is not a set. This is my sister-in-law's house. I'm on vacation on holiday. I have a belated Valentine's Day dinner with my wife coming up in about an hour and a half. It is a privilege to share in NFL fandom with all of you who consume our content on ESPN, but in particular on the NFL Brekkie Show. So with that, I think it's time for the credits to roll. Keep an eye on our lighting guy, because whoever we have in New South Wales doing lighting needs to be fired. But thank you for watching with us. For Laurie, Horesh, I am Phil Murphy. Thus ends the 2022 NFL season. We will see you throughout the offseason, and of course, we will see you again in week 1 next year.